Well, this section of the year, and perhaps for the rest of the year, is starting to look very, very good for Max Verstappen and Red Bull Honda. Another superlative drive by Max to lead from start to finish. Didn't set fastest lap, but he did it all from the pole. What a win. Yeah, it's one thing to have the best car in the field, as Sergio Perez did. It's another to dominate the race and control the race as Max did. Just superb. And again, it gives the lie to all those people over the last 4 or 5 years who've been saying, oh, Max is this, Max is that, but he doesn't have the ability perhaps to lead a championship and then win a championship and to be consistent. Well, to me, it was always clear that Max had that talent. And here he is now with the best car in Formula One, getting 100% from it. So congratulations to him. There are a couple of nice little cameos in the race from a Max Verstappen perspective. The first was the start, just a perfect start, really good through turn one, and the exit from turn one and how he pulled away from Lewis on heavy fuel there, very, very impressive. And the other one was when there was a bit of a discussion going on the radio about a weird feeling he was getting through the brake pedal going into turn one. He'd touched the brakes and he didn't get quite the retardation that he should have got. And incredibly, and this is, I guess, this is the great thing about Formula One 2021 style, very quickly in the garage, they twigged what had been going on. Max was braking for turn 10 on the curbs, and that was doing something to the brake-by-wire system. And therefore, they just said, don't brake on the curbs, and everything was fine again. Lovely little moment, and typical of Formula One, but very typical of the way Red Bull and Max managed the Grand Prix today. So a superb win for him. He won in the end by a long way, but only because Lewis on the second last lap, came in for a set of soft tyres to set fastest lap, to get 1 point, at least salvage 1 point on top of the P2 he inevitably was going to get, and that he duly did. So Lewis was second, a very good second, you could say, for sure got the maximum from his package as well. But as we've certainly been saying this weekend, and we implied in France as well, there is a huge difference at the moment between Red Bull and their aerodynamic efficiency and that Honda power unit, all put together. Adrian Newey, high rake chassis, great downforce, efficient downforce, and that of the Mercedes, which is lower rake and probably has about the same power as the Honda. I think there will be a lot of talk now about Mercedes. Can they respond in some way to this straight line speed advantage that Max has? At one point on the radio, they said to Lewis that it adds up to about 0.25 of a second per lap. That's the top speed advantage of Max over Lewis, which of course multiplied by a full race distance is a long way. And from Lewis's point of view, that would have kind of justified it, but of course justified the gap. But the reality is that in trying to make up for that difference, Lewis might have been using the tyres harder at some given moment of the race, and that would have hurt him exponentially as a result of the top speed drama. So yeah, a very good result for Lewis in that sense. Nothing else went wrong, and he finished P2. And for Valtteri Bottas, a good day to salvage what had been a really bad weekend up until then. He'd been quick, obviously very quick in qualifying, but he got that 3-place grid penalty. But yeah, he finished third, just beat Sergio Perez. He was running a different tyre strategy because he was starting on the soft tyre. Remember, the other quick runners around him all starting on the medium. So inevitably, he was going to be on a different tyre strategy. And as it turned out, he was the only driver in the race to go for a genuine 3 stops. So he started on the soft, went to the medium, then went to the hard. And he was good on all 3 tyres. But one of the problems for Sergio was a balked left rear in the first pit stop, which cost him quite a lot of time. And that added up to the difference in strategy and everything else. He eventually got beaten. So Sergio, a good 4th. I suppose that reflects his lack of pace on his first run in Q2 yesterday when he was on the medium tyre. And had he started on the medium, it might have been a slightly different day for Sergio, but he can't complain about it, I would have thought. And then Lando Norris kind of justified everything that we saw yesterday with that great qualifying lap, finished 5th. He was fabulous in the first couple of laps of the race. Indeed, in the first corner, when he was on the outside of Sergio made a really, really good start, the quickest start on the grid, according to the graphic, and was right inside Lando as they went into turn 1. Lando stayed with him on the outside and then ran over the curbs on the outside to keep position in front of Sergio. That was a really nice piece of driving by both drivers. I don't think Lando would have done that if that had been, I don't know, Yuki Tsunoda inside him perhaps. But knowing it was Sergio, who's very, very clean in traffic, always has been, that was a really nice move from Lando. And I think Sergio would have felt, well, yeah, okay, you can do that. And then it was interesting, turn 4, actually, they had another bit of a go, but Lando still stayed in front of him. Meanwhile, Max and Lewis, even on the first couple of laps, were pulling away from Lando like crazy. So the McLaren's weak spot, as we saw today, definitely their pace on a high fuel load. They were not quick at all relative to the quick cars around them when they were on heavy fuel. But that presumably they said, well, we think we've got all our performance parameters sorted for next weekend when they're racing again, of course, at the same circuit. So it'll be interesting to see how McLaren are on a heavy fuel load this time next week. Anyway, getting back to that dice with Sergio, Lando eventually ceded position to Sergio Perez. He overheated his tyres on the heavy fuel load, so the tyres went off. He basically lost grip. Sergio passed him relatively easily, but then Lando did a really good job, I think, of cooling the tyres, keeping a gap behind him, a solid gap, which he sustained right through the race, and then was pretty quick and pretty good throughout the race. It was just that early phase, they cooked the tyres very, very quickly on that heavy fuel load. So he did a good job and finished 5th, ahead of the 2 Ferraris. Amazing drive by Charles Leclerc. I said yesterday, it'll probably be one of those days when Charles finishes 6th or 7th, I think I said, and won't get much acclaim. I think he got a lot of acclaim this time because there's nothing that fires up a race than to see a driver like Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari coming in on the first lap, which he did after a skirmish with Pierre Gasly out of turn 1. They touched basically, and Charles' front wing was damaged and Pierre's left rear was punctured, which put him out of the race completely by the time he got back into the garage on lap 1. So Charles finished 7th, but it could have been 5th had he not had that drama. So he won't be too upset about that. Indeed, I think he would have really enjoyed the racing today. He got to pass a lot of cars. There are a lot of blue flags out there. As I was saying earlier, a lot of traffic on this short lap. And he was having to get out of the way too, but also he was doing a lot of overtaking and a lot of passing. So an excellent day for Ferrari in general, because they had reliability, and Carlos Sainz was there as well, looking pretty good. Running a slightly different strategy to most. He started on the medium tyre and ended on the hard tyre, so he maximised his day as well. And as he said afterwards, I think Ferrari can be pretty happy with the way things turned out after what had been a really, really bad qualifying session for them. Lance Stroll finished 8th after a really good opening lap. Very good drive, good tyre management, did a good job throughout the race. A lot of pressure from Fernando Alonso towards the end. Fernando got the most from the Alpine as well. Not an easy day for him. He said on the formation lap, he said something like, oh, I think this is going to be a very lucky day for us. But I don't think it particularly was. Yuki Tsunoda did a really good job in the AlphaTauri Honda, finished 10th. He was behind Fernando for a lot of the second half of the race in dirty air, but he did get a 3-place grid penalty as well as Valtteri Bottas for balking Bottas, as it happened, ironically. So for him to do that after that 3-place grid penalty, very good drive, and makes up, of course, for the disappointment of Pierre Gasly out on the first lap after that skirmish with Charles Leclerc. No doubt AlphaTauri will be back in force again next week. The car looked really good around this circuit. And I thought Kimi Räikkönen looked really good in the Alpha as well. Best race Kimi's had for a long time. He finished just out of the points in 11th place, but he had some good people behind him, particularly Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo, where was he? What has he been doing all weekend? I mean, he was just not there. And there was a moment when they got on the radio and said, Daniel, you need to try to get on the power sooner. I think it was turn 7, just get the car out of there quicker. And Daniel said, oh, I can't do it. The rear tyres won't take it. So, that is a bad thing, obviously, if the tyres won't take it. And Daniel, in his mind, will have got the maximum from the car. But all you can do really in Formula One is look to see what your teammate is doing. I mean, Lando Norris, driving as well as he is and finishing 5th as he did, Daniel obviously needs to have a long, hard look at where where he's losing time for a start, and secondly, how he adapts to all the different things that are going on around him, whether it's qualifying, whether it's heavy fuel, whether it's race tires, whether it's soft tires. And that's where Lando is doing such a good job at the moment. They took the downforce out of the McLaren, got the top speed, and it kind of threw Daniel for the rest of the weekend. Anyway, as they're all saying at the end of this Grand Prix, well, it's great, we got lots of data now for next weekend. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is everybody's going to be improving by the same amount, learning from the same amount. The hard to swallow story of this race, however, was George Russell. He was incredibly quick early on, parlaying his grid position, which had been helped, of course, by that Yuki Tsunoda penalty. So he actually started 10th, and he was up to 7th, looking really good with some very quick guys behind him, when the Williams-Mercedes developed quite an unusual problem these days. We saw the airline going in during the pit stop, and it was a very, very long pit stop. Obviously, the engine was losing air, and eventually, with an amber light glowing in the cockpit, he retired relatively early in the race. Great shame, because George for sure would have finished top 10 and might have been as high as somewhere near Carlos Sainz, 7th or 8th, around there. Probably would have beaten Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. So a disappointing day for George. The good news is the next race is only a week away, as we say. So Red Bull Honda outstanding this weekend. Max Verstappen getting 100% from the package. Mercedes P2 with Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas. Sergio Perez kind of there or thereabouts, P4. On this occasion, the number 2 battle went to Valtteri Bottas. McLaren-Mercedes in the hands of Lando Norris, then very clearly best of the rest. And then Ferrari not too far behind, quicker than the likes of Aston Martin, Alpine and AlphaTauri in the hands of Yuki Tsunoda. So they were the conclusions from the Styrian Grand Prix. Let's see what happens at the same circuit next weekend.